Hey, you. Finally awake.
Alright everyone, it's Mike Redacted, and today I'm going to talk about something just near and dear to my heart. Something that I've been thinking about ever since I completed Skyrim for the first time about 12 years ago. I'm going to discuss my wish list for the Elder Scrolls 6, which is the next entry in the Elder Scrolls series. I also think that if they put everything in the game that I have in this list, it would be the best version of the Elder Scrolls 6 that it possibly could be. The sections of this video are not in any particular order, so you'll just need to deal with that. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to leave a comment, like and subscribe, or if you disagree with me or think I am missing something, I would also love to hear that in the comment section. Before we get started with the wish list, let's go over some leaks. This screenshot, which is on screen now, is of a supposed leak which appeared on the Elder Scrolls subreddit in June of 2024. This screenshot appears to have come from 4chan, which is definitely the Wild West of the internet. It's not out of the question that this leak could be credible, as I have previously seen a leak about Fallout 76 from 4chan, which turned out to be true. Now obviously I don't want to fully base my own wild speculation on all of this, but it's definitely a good place to start to see what other people might be hoping is in the next game. I do believe the first 2 points in this supposed leak though, as the game will likely release in 2028, with Starfield releasing in 2023, 5 years of development probably seems about right, although I would definitely have welcomed the game being released sooner. I also believe the point about the game being set in Hammerfell. Numerous YouTubers have used various leaks and information and screenshots from the trailer to kind of point to the game being set in Hammerfell. The trailer, which released in 2018, which was 6 years ago at this point by the way. For people who don't know anything about Hammerfell, Hammerfell is a tropical arid land consisting of a variety of climates such as jungles, deserts, mountains, grassland and more, so it would definitely be a very varied and interesting place for the next Elder Scrolls to be set, and I would definitely be happy with the game being set in Hammerfell. Some of the quest stuff which appears in this supposed leak does sound very cool, like the faction quests crossing over each other, but I've not seen any indication from Bethesda or any other sources that this is going to be in the game, so we will take inspiration from this rather than assuming that it's true. Let's start at the beginning of the game for the beginning of our improvements. I want the tutorial part of the Elder Scrolls 6 to be short and even possibly optional. Obviously, if we look at the games like Fallout 3, the tutorial is an hour long, which is far too long, and it can be monotonous on repeat playthroughs. I get that for some reason every Elder Scrolls game begins with the protagonist in jail, but this doesn't mean that you need to spend half an hour or an hour explaining why the player gets out of jail. The player could get out of jail with the captain of the guard saying that they were imprisoned by mistake, and then there could be a first mission which is very tutorialized, just like the first mission with Sunny Smiles at the beginning of New Vegas. If you wanted to do it, you could, and you were pointed towards it. You were given some starting gear, but if you didn't want to do it, you could just walk out into the wasteland, and it's completely optional. I really feel like most people know how to play these games already. Any new systems which appear in this game can be introduced over time whilst the player plays the game, and really what the player wants to do when they get to the tutorial mission is just get through it as fast as possible, and making it really short just kind of pleases the player, doesn't it? And it gets them out into the vast beautiful world as fast as possible, which is what people want. The character creator in Starfield, despite the weird problem which I have previously referred to as having prey eyes, is actually really good, and I would like to see something as in depth or even a bit more in depth as this for the Elder Scrolls 6. I would especially like to be able to choose my own backstory for the beginning of the game. I thought that was a very cool feature in Starfield. We would definitely want to able to give the player the option to have their background as just unknown or NA, literally no selection at all, not applicable. This is so that the player is not locked into any kind of background at all if they want to play the game with a clean slate. Perhaps some of the backgrounds could also affect the way the game starts as well, where if you chose to become like a skimmer dealer, or that was your backstory, then you would get let out of prison as it's the end of your character's sentence for dealing skimmer. Or if your character has a good background, they could probably be let out as the guard captain says, oh, you're jailed by mistake, but you know, don't worry about it. Here's some starting gear, get out there. I'm not going to cover leveling systems in any in-depth way in this video, as leveling systems are very difficult to design. If we look at the leveling system in Oblivion and you did the maths with it, you'd realise that the leveling system was definitely very flawed. I do like the idea of your effectiveness with a skill increasing as you use it, but as shown with the Oblivion system, this can become bogged down with the mathematical problems, where if you don't level in a specific way, then you lose out compared to someone who plays the meta way. If you don't remember, the meta way to level in Oblivion was to actually choose your core primary skills as skills which you could level when you wanted, like alchemy and magic skills, and then have the skills that you wanted to actually use as minor skills, so you could actually control when you level up. I did like the system in Skyrim, so I think that Bethesda could probably just stick with something along the lines of that. Although I would be open to any other leveling system so long as they tried to keep the spirit of a skill increases as you use it. Continuing on the assumption that the game takes place in Hammerfell, which as we saw from the quote from the wiki has an abundance of different biomes, I would love for Bethesda to play into this and create all sorts of different weather systems, tropical storms with heavy downpours in the rainforests, with booming thunderstorms and cyclones in the more temperate and tropical regions, sandstorms which restrict the player's visibility in the more desert and arid areas, and even snow and blizzard on the highest peaks of the game. I think it would be very cool, and Bethesda would just be able to use it to change how the player plays in certain areas, just like how different biomes, weather mechanics and Breath of the Wild forced players to adapt their playstyles. Maybe not to the same extreme extent where a player is literally restricted from an area if they're not wearing certain gear, but I think they could definitely use it to encourage players in survival mode to change their behaviour, such as wearing light armour and clothing whilst in a desert area, or wearing heavy clothing in snow biomes. It's a really simple concept, but I think it would be really cool if Bethesda implemented hunting and fishing systems for an alternative way to get food and resources. We all know that the player could hunt, and in the Anniversary Edition even fish in Skyrim, but I think that they should try and formalise this hunting system with a hunting system which allows the player to track animals, lure animals, and also determines how much meat or resources you get from animals based on how you kill them, just like in Red Dead Redemption 2. I really like that system and we should go for a repeat here. I'm sure if you've watched any lengthy Skyrim or Oblivion retrospectives, you've heard the phrase "as wide as an ocean, as deep as a puddle" used to describe them. Despite Skyrim having hundreds of quests to do, the majority of them are actually quite simple and can usually boil down to go to a location, kill enemies, possibly pick up an item, and then return to the quest giver to complete the quest. In the Elder Scrolls 6, there actually should be less quests overall, but a lot of the quests which do exist should be more in-depth, require more thought, and have more of a narrative to them. The quest I detailed previously, where you go to a location, kill enemies, pick up an item, and then return to the quest giver to complete it, could be enhanced and made longer and more engaging. Let's quickly revise that quest scenario to make it more interesting. First, you get the quest, and instead of just being given the location of an item, you are instead given the name of a person or group who has the item. We'll refer to this person or group as Person A. Person A supposedly has the item. You go to the inn or ask a local about Person A, and one random NPC points you to another person, Person B. Person B is an affiliate of Person A and definitely knows where Person A is. When you get to the location of Person B, Person B doesn't want to give up the information that you need to find the item, and Person A obviously. So now the player has the option where you can either bribe Person B, persuade him, threaten him, or alternatively even kill him, but that would add an extra step where you would need to search around to get more information from maybe their camp or their house. You can also take an option where you take a bribe from Person B to go back to the quest giver in order to finish the quest and basically tell the quest giver, I couldn't find Person A, they're gone. And that would be like the bad ending, the quick bad ending for the quest. Assuming the player didn't take the bribe, eventually they have the information that they need. They've got the location of the cave, the dungeon, the castle that Person A is in, and then you make your way, or the player makes their way over to that location. Depending on your choice previously on how you got the information from Person B, there is a possibility that the player could be ambushed on their way to the location. After the player quickly dispatches this cannon fodder and enters the location, the player fights through the cave or dungeon to retrieve the item and goes back to the quest giver to give them the quest or item that they were after. Literally, I came up with this quest in about 5 minutes. I know parts of it are cliche, but still, Bethesda should be able to write a more interesting and detailed quest than I can in 5 minutes. Bethesda should realise that a ghoul can't survive in a fridge for fucking 200 years. I took a simple quest, which you have experienced in Skyrim a million times, and made it a bit more interesting by adding just a few steps more and a bit of a narrative and a choice. I think that The Witcher 3 is a great game because it paces itself with the tracking and searching steps and quests, rather than just chucking you into combat again and again and again, which can get really tiresome. The Elder Scrolls 6 needs to take a page from their book and add some more interesting and better paced quests. They could also add some more side quests which are actually part of a chain of quests. Maybe you come back to the quest giver from the quest example that I gave earlier, and the quest giver's wife has been killed by Person C, who's Person A's overboss, or something along the lines of that, or it opens up into a question which is completely unrelated to the item which you got. You know, they could really expand on it in a way that you don't even see coming. The quests in Skyrim are a lot of them are one-dimensional. I'm not saying that every single quest needs to be some sort of chain quest which is in-depth and you need to think for. The one-dimensional quests can exist peacefully so long as they coexist with more of a narrative and driven quest lines where the player needs to actually engage their brain. The faction reputation system is a system that I absolutely loved in Fallout New Vegas, and there's no reason that Bethesda can't integrate it into the Elder Scrolls 6. Factions should obviously have some sort of disposition towards the player based on their actions. Obviously, due to Bethesda making the Elder Scrolls games very accessible, they would not want this faction reputation system to restrict players from being able to access the main settlements. So having a bad faction reputation with any of the factions would only restrict minor settlements and other locations like that. All the towns and cities are safe. Even so, the player could be restricted from certain quest lines, and the player could also be attacked on sight if they are spotted by the faction that they have a bad reputation with. I think this system would be interesting to put in an Elder Scrolls game, as it makes the player feel like their actions in the game world actually matter and they're not just a nobody. You know, people are looking at their actions, and it makes the game world feel a bit more alive. And don't we always need a little bit of that? A bounty system could really complement and enhance the faction reputation system greatly. I thought the bounty system in Red Dead Redemption 2 was really good fun, and it was a good way of making some money. Imagine in the Elder Scrolls 6 that the player can hunt down bounties for factions that they're allied with, and also the player could become a bounty for factions that they are an enemy of themselves. This could lead to some really cool random encounters, just like in Fallout New Vegas. In that game, when your reputation becomes low enough with a faction, they don't just attack you when you encounter them in a location, they actively seek you out and try and eliminate you. If implemented in the Elder Scrolls 6, I think this system would be a great way for Bethesda to enhance the world building and show reactions to the player's in-game actions. On top of faction bounties, it would also be cool for the player to be able to take on private contracts to track down criminals. As with the faction bounties, the player themselves could also be tracked down by a bounty hunter themselves if they are a criminal with a high enough bounty on their head. One of the key selling points of Oblivion way back in 2006 was the Radiant AI system. In a nutshell, the Radiant AI system is a system which gives every single named NPC their own schedule to live by, from sleeping and eating at certain set intervals all the way to them going to the tavern in the evening. Nearly every single human NPC in Oblivion had their own schedules, and it was a very cool system. There were flaws with the system back in 2006 when the game released, but I believe that Bethesda could possibly vastly improve on the system and implement it properly into the Elder Scrolls 6. As part of these improvements, it would also mean that they would possibly need to bring the scope of the Radiant system in, where instead of everyone having their own schedule, only certain NPCs have their own schedule. Unnamed and certain other NPCs, such as key faction members, could be excluded from the Radiant AI system. This system would hugely benefit the world building of the game, as the player would witness NPCs living life as real humans do in real life. I will caveat this statement by saying that this system would obviously take a huge amount of work, and if push came to shove and I needed to choose some of the features from this list to cut in order to get the game out the door, this would probably be one of the features that I would cut. I understand that this list is a wish list, and some of the features or mechanics which I talk about in the video may not be achievable. Off the coast of Hammerfell, there is an island called Stros Mackay, which I would expect to be part of the game if Hammerfell is where the next Elder Scrolls game is set. Bethesda just can't release an Elder Scrolls game in 2028 and have the only way you travel to Stros Mackay to be a static loading screen. That's so boring. There's also a lot of coastline in Hammerfell. If you look at the map, you'll see it's long, and there's plenty of coves and lots of interesting geography going on there. The player would benefit by having a boat in the game that they can drive, as they would be able to navigate the coastline with ease on a small schooner or a rowboat. Having drivable boats in the game would be a big step up for mobility in the Elder Scrolls 6 when compared to Skyrim. The boats in Skyrim, you walked up to them, you pressed the action button, the guy talked to you, you pressed the action button again, there was a black screen, and then all of a sudden you were teleported to where you wanted to be. That's boring. It's current year, they need to improve on their boring ass systems. Just as in The Witcher 3, I think the player, whilst not in survival mode, should be able to fast travel with their boat to any port that they have previously visited. This would improve mobility and encourage the player to stick with their boat and keep exploring on the water for longer, as they would be able to sail up and down the coast from the point where they stopped exploring previously, or from a point of interest that they want to go back to. It would also allow the player to park their boat in a safe and memorable, easy to get back to area. Perhaps there could also be a feature where the player pays a small fee at a dock in order to recover their boat from the dock that they are currently at. Then this would allow the player to resume their boat travels. This could also play into the water becoming a bigger part of the game, where maybe the player can sail to wrecks or dive to things under the water. Dungeons under the water would be a really interesting concept, and having drivable boats would be the key that unlocks this feature and makes it cool and accessible rather than boring and monotonous to do. If you saw my previous video, you would know that I am a survival mode enjoyer. I don't think it would be too much work for Bethesda to add a survival mode into the game. As I discussed in my previous video, survival mode is an optional mode which forces the player to manage their food, thirst and sleep. On top of this, they cannot use the fast travel system to get around the game. I think that this would be a great option to be able to turn this mode on in the Elder Scrolls 6, as it would force the player to play more cautiously and tactically. Adding this option to the game would also attract more hardcore players to the game, and I know that Bethesda loves attracting as many people as possible to play their games. It won't take that much work. Just fire it in the game, Todd, and be done with it. The lifeblood of any Bethesda game and what gives the Bethesda games their longevity, at least in part, is the modding scene. Starfield has many flaws, some of which I have talked about in my video titled How to Fix Starfield. Please check it out. But one of the biggest crimes committed by Starfield is the length of time for the official mod support to launch. Sure, there were some mods that were created before with the use of hex editors and tools like that, but modders were unable to properly utilise tools to create the mods with the scope that they wanted to make. This means that almost a year after release of Skyrim, the mod scene is nowhere near where it should be. This is why I think Bethesda should really focus on releasing the official mod support tools as close to the release date of the game as possible. I understand that it may not be possible to get the mod tools out on launch day, and no one's asking for that, but surely they should be putting out the mod tools 1 month or 2 months after the launch date. This way, modders can get started on their passion projects and cool ideas as soon as possible after launch. And the fact of the matter is that if you launch the mod tools close to the release date of the game, there's a lot of fire and passion around the game at that time, and people are motivated to make mods. But when you wait 1 year to release the mod tools, then people have lost their passion, people have walked away from the game, and people that previously would have been interested in making mods are just moved on to the next game that they're interested in. We all know that the vanilla companions in Skyrim are one-dimensional, and the companions in Starfield, whilst being much more in-depth than in Skyrim, are absolutely insufferable. I would rather drink paint thinner than spend any more time with Sarah from Starfield. She constantly moans and criticises my player for their actions and choices. Sarah, I'm not the one that got our crew killed and waited 10 years to go and check out what happened on the place that they crashed. She would constantly moan and criticise my player for their actions and choices. Bethesda needs to realise that the companions are there to support the player, not to nag them. Perhaps an offhand comment or two about not agreeing with one of the player's choices may be fine, but I fucking hate it when one of those goody two-shoe companions goes in a huff with you, and then you need to talk to them on the ship and apologise to them. Half the time I don't even know what the fuck I've done wrong. If the player is doing evil stuff which the companion does not agree with, then they should just leave your service or even just attack you. If it's serious enough, they should just attack you. If you're mowing down civilians and they're of a good disposition, then obviously in real life they would attack you or leave. So why don't they do that here? Bethesda should take a look at the Inigo mod for a good baseline of what a good follower is. He comments on locations, you can chat to him and find out his backstory once you gain his trust. And if you attack him, he'll fuck you up. This is an important one for me. We all know the voice protagonist in Fallout 4 was an interesting experiment by Bethesda. I did not like it, and it really broke my headcanon and immersion when I was playing as a murdering, thieving, psycho and jet addict when I got into a conversation and my character was well spoken and was acting with a mostly calm demeanour.
My son's missing. Is there anyone in town who can help?
I doubt that Bethesda would put a voice protagonist in this game, but just to be safe, I'm specifically asking it for it not to be in the game on my wish list. If they must have a voice protagonist, I at least hope that either they give the option to turn it off or they release the mod tools close enough to launch that someone can have a mod where they just make the protagonist shut the fuck up. The dynamic pricing of goods, which is an idea which I got from Witcher 3, not sure if it's implemented or not. I think this idea would be a good addition to The Elder Scrolls 6, and by dynamic pricing I mean that items which are scarce, buy and sell for more at traders, and items which are abundant, buy and sell for less. An in-game example of this would be that food would sell for higher prices in an area where food is less abundant, such as a desert or somewhere quite arid, and then in a city or next to a farm, the same food which sells for more in the desert sells for less because they have an abundance of the food. This could lead to new and interesting ways for the player to make money in The Elder Scrolls 6, as the player could track prices and goods and trade goods between settlements to make a profit. I don't think the idea adds anything much to the game in terms of world building, but I just think it would be a cool and interesting idea for Bethesda to try out. And I know that they do occasionally try things out, like the voice protagonist, so think of it as an experiment, Bethesda. I don't think it would make the player overly rich, because in every Elder Scrolls and Fallout game so far, I've already been able to find ways such as alchemy, or just picking up absolutely everything off the floor and selling it to become ridiculously wealthy. So I don't think that it would give the player too much of a way to make money. In the rumour that I showed you at the start of the video, it showed that even the smallest of cities were the size of Whiterun, and that there were going to be some very large cities and settlements in the game. I really hope that this is true, as I have always had a bit of a problem with the size and scale of the cities in Skyrim and other Elder Scrolls games. Not just Elder Scrolls games, but Bethesda games in general. See, if you look at the concept art for the cities, they look massive and sprawling and really cool, and then you look at it in game and it's like, oh, this thing that's meant to be a city is a village, and it really doesn't make sense sometimes. I really wish they could up the scale. It's really hard to think that the Jarl of somewhere like Falkreath or Dawnstar would hold any real power, as when you go to either of their settlements, they're literally just small villages with like 5 houses in them. On the other hand, the largest city in Starfield, New Atlantis, is mainly focused around the underground section and the well, and the above ground section is essentially a giant empty park. Bethesda really need to strike the right balance between size and density of points of interest. I imagine that they will also need to balance the performance in this equation also, due to the fact that large cities are possible, but they may become laggy messes for people without NASA computers. Even still, by the time that The Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, if it is releasing in 2028, the Nvidia 60 series of graphics cards will be out, and the next generation of gaming consoles will probably be out as well. And perhaps that will give us the extra firepower to run these games well. Probably not. The random encounters are one of my favourite part of Bethesda games. There are 95 random encounters in Skyrim, and I couldn't find a reliable source for how many random encounters there are in Fallout 4 or Starfield, but from the look of the wiki page that lists them, there seems to be at least the double of the amounts of random encounters in Fallout 4 than there is in Skyrim. I want this trend to continue and get the double the amount of random encounters again. Random encounters are an amazing way that Bethesda ensures that everyone's experience of traversing through the game are just a little bit different. They make the game world feel alive and reactive to your choices. I think that fitting in as many interesting random encounters as possible into the Elder Scrolls 6, and importantly, pacing when the player sees and gets these random encounters properly, is a great way to make traversing through the game world more enjoyable and engaging. I thought that the campaign in Skyrim and Oblivion were acceptable, fit for purpose. They weren't amazing or groundbreaking, but as I said, fit for purpose. I want the campaign in the Elder Scrolls 6 to be of a higher quality and possibly a bit better. Todd Howard has made it clear that he intends his games to be played and enjoyed for long periods of time. No doubt the campaign of the Elder Scrolls 6 is probably already written, but one thing I hope they include is quests with multiple choices which give different outcomes. The Elder Scrolls games are meant to allow the player to live another life in another world, and along with that comes the chance to play as you wish. I understand that the player is probably some sort of saviour as told by the Elder Scrolls themselves, and this is getting into deep lore, and that the ending of the campaign is written in stone, but could an evil character not save the day in a more evil way or do evil actions in order to achieve the end goal? Someone who might think, well, the end justifies the means, so they go about slaughtering people or something like that. I would love for Bethesda to at least explore the possibility of multiple choice quests within the main story itself. Although the main campaign for Fallout 4 was absolutely trash, it was at least cool that there was different factions which you could go with to get different outcomes to the quests. The spellcrafting system which you could get in Oblivion, once you got all of the Mages Guild recommendations and gained access to the Arcane University, was very cool. Don't think anyone's going to dispute that. Sure, it could be costly and kind of wacky as well in a way that it worked, but I thought that it added so much to the magic system in Oblivion. I was actually quite disheartened to see that you were not able to make spells in the same way in Skyrim. I think it's pretty much a given that there will be some sort of mages guild in the game which your character will be able to join, and I think it would be very cool, and it would encourage more players to try out a magic build if they were able to add the feature of making your own spells in. It's always nice to get extra customization and personalization options given to the player. Similar to the spell making, inside the Arcane University in Oblivion, you could also enchant a weapon. It seems like in Skyrim they toned down the enchanting system, where unless you were a really high level, you were only able to put one enchant on the item at a time. I think that they should take the best of both the Skyrim and the Oblivion systems and meld it together, where the player has more control over the exact stats of the thing they're enchanting, but perhaps, like in Skyrim, you would need to destroy weapons in order to learn the enchants in the first place. That way, the system isn't completely overpowered without work from the player and a little bit of luck as well, and they're also able to customize the weapon with multiple cool enchants at a single time. They should also add a system where you can disenchant an item without destroying it. Say I've found the Daedric sword which is enchanted, but I don't like the enchant that's on it. With that system, I could get rid of the enchant on it and keep the weapon. There could be a nominal fee or a requirement for a high level soul gem for this so that it's not too overpowered. They could also make it so a certain quest weapons and Daedric artifacts cannot be disenchanted, and if they really wanted to make it difficult to do, they could make it so only one vendor or a group of vendors are able to disenchant items, and you need to go to them in order to get this disenchantment system. I really liked the house customization in the Hearthfire DLC of Skyrim, but I wish that they would go a bit more in depth with what they did in that DLC for the Elder Scrolls 6. In the player homes, it would be cool if the game gave you two decorating options. The first option would be to have default item placement, where the game would place all of the furniture for you in predetermined locations. And the second option would be for you to choose the furniture and choose the placement of that furniture yourself. This way, people could fully customize their houses to their needs and desires. I'm sure you would find people online posting pictures showing how they've decorated each of their houses, and the first option of having a preset layout for people who don't want to spend the time decorating. I would say it's similar to the system we see in Starfield, except the fact that we're adding the first default option where the player doesn't need to decorate the house if they don't want to or don't have the time, because sometimes honestly it's just a bit annoying. I'm also going to just chuck something misc into this section of the video where I'm saying that I hope that the storage of the houses is not limited by weight. So in Starfield you'll notice that you can only put like 150, I don't know whether it's kilograms or pounds, but 150 weight units into a single box. I find this to be quite annoying, and especially when you've got a lot of heavy stuff, it's just tiresome and your house ends up just being crates upon crates upon crates, which isn't really fun. The game isn't realistic in the first place. Why implement this? What does it add to the gameplay? Bethesda need to have a hard look in the mirror and ask themselves that question, and in the Elder Scrolls 6, take it out, because the answer is that it doesn't add a goddamn thing. Years ago, I heard a rumour that the Elder Scrolls 6 would be set on the full continent of Akavir, and the Elder Scrolls 7, if I even see it when I'm alive, I'll be lucky, would be set on the full continent of Tamriel. This is obviously still possible, but as time has gone on, I realised that without massive amount of random generation, which is okay in Starfield, but for a game such as the Elder Scrolls, they made a conscious decision to step away from the random generation with Morrowind. I don't think that's really the route that Bethesda want to take. On a side note, I know that things such as placement of rocks, plants and trees are random. I'm not saying the full thing is without random generation, just the bits that matter. When I'm mentioning randomness here, I'm talking about dungeon placement, the dungeons being handmade, and other points of interest. That's what I don't want to be randomly generated. I do not want the system which is in Starfield, which is boring, and you can find out more about what I think about that in my video, which I've previously mentioned. I think it would be very cool for us to see a very large DLC which is set in another province of Tamriel, which we have not seen in the mainline games before, excluding ESO. This could be somewhere like Elsewhere or Sinium, Valenwood, or even the Somerset Isles. Obviously they are all present in the Elder Scrolls Online, which I have mentioned, but I believe that it would be way cooler to see them, or at least see part of them, in a mainline game, as it would give us a look at the game world from the perspective of another province, with all the architectural, political and cultural differences which that province brings. And I think that would be so cool, honestly so cool. It's something I've dreamed about for a long time. This one may get the game banned in Germany or somewhere like that, but I don't really care. As I previously mentioned, my Fallout 4 character is a jet and psycho addict, and I love that I'm able to play as a drugged up maniac who needs more jet and cycle just to survive. Traditionally in the Elder Scrolls games, you're not able to get drunk or high off of the alcohol and drugs which exist in the game. Barring one mission in Oblivion where you do take tree sap and go nuts. I think that they should introduce a system in the Elder Scrolls 6 where the player can not only get drunk and high, but they can also get addicted to the drugs and alcohol which are present in the game. This would purely be for the benefit of role playing and for fun, but I do think that it would be a really cool feature to add. Obviously they may not add this feature, as I previously mentioned, Germany has some restrictions about it, but they would need to give the game a high age rating, which may turn off their owners at Xbox who want to market the game as teen in America or 16 plus in European markets, so that they're covering a wider audience. One of the great additions to Starfield, and one of the things that I believe were universally approved of, were the updates to the movement system which allowed the player to mantle and slide. When this game comes out, The Elder Scrolls 6, it will be the late 2020s. I don't think that we can let Bethesda get away with releasing the same old movement mechanics as they did in Skyrim. Mantling would also allow dungeon and level design innovation, where dungeons could feature more verticality, where the player needs to climb up ledges or on a rock face. They have to bring the innovation that they added in Starfield and then refine it. I do realise that the sliding which was introduced in Starfield may be more of a shooter feature rather than a feature for a sword game. Instead of having sliding in the game, perhaps Bethesda could add a dodge feature where the player hops to the side, which is indicated or directed by the player at the time when they press the dodge button. This could make sword combat just a bit more exciting. The movement in Oblivion feels very floaty and quick. When you run and jump around, it's as if your character has bionic legs. When you swing your sword, it's as if the sword or axe or weapon weighs nothing at all. And in Skyrim, some of the weapons are well balanced, but some of them can feel quite heavy, and power attacks can render you out of control of your character for a second or two, which can be frustrating. Surely there's some sort of happy medium with the movement, which is between Oblivion's quick and near weightless movement and Skyrim's weighty movement. Probably more towards Skyrim's weighty movement, to be honest. But to keep the movement fair, all of the movement which the player can do, including the mantling, sliding if they add it, or dodging, should be able to be done by NPCs, so long as the NPCs have the skills which are required. I don't like the system where the torso and legging clothings are bundled together. I do understand that Bethesda has probably done this so the player characters and NPCs look more thematically correct, and so no one can walk around looking like a clown unless they want to. Maybe it's also in some sort of attempt to simplify the game as well. But I think that there should be better player customization, and that Bethesda should give back the option for the player to independently choose what they're wearing on their torso and on their legs. This would mean that the player could mix and match the items in order to get the look that they like. There still could be some items of clothing which encompass both the torso and the legs if they really want there to be. One system I loved in Baldur's Gate 3 was the system which allowed you to dye clothing. You couldn't dye every item of clothing, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was most of the clothing could be dyed and it looked really fucking cool. Now I think that the Elder Scrolls 6 should try and adopt a system like this, where you can dye clothing and armors. I think it would be really cool. It would add to the player customization, and perhaps if Bethesda doesn't want to let the player do it themselves and make it a bit more difficult, they could force the player to go to a merchant or a trader to do this instead of being able to do it themselves. This point is kind of diffuse, but the point is just make the game beautiful. One thing that Starfield got right was that there was lots of beautiful vistas. There was more than just one colour palette, and there were lots and lots of places which people wanted to take screenshots of. Assuming the Elder Scrolls 6 is set in Hammerfell, Bethesda have lots of opportunities to make the game beautiful and have distinct colour palettes and shaders for each area, which make each area and biome feel unique. There's nothing better than playing a good game which also looks good. Lately I've been playing a lot of Ghost of Tsushima, and god, it's really a beautiful game. The colours pop and it's really enjoyable just to exist within that game world. And the final point in this list is that we need to have a stable release. When Skyrim released, it was a bloody mess. I need Bethesda to hire more game testers and engineers and actually listen to what they're recommending, and listen when they tell you that the game is unshippable. Bethesda needs to spend more time on bug fixing and optimization in order to ensure a flawless and relatively bug-free release. Listen, I've worked in software testing and I know it's impossible to release software without bugs in it, but software should be at the level where users are able to play the game or software without encountering issues which crash the game, break quests, or wreak havoc with the performance of the game. I would not be surprised if The Elder Scrolls 6 is delayed at least once, and once they announce the release date, that announced release date is pushed back. That's fine. You know what they say, a delayed game is eventually good, a rushed game is forever bad. A buggy release is something that Bethesda have a reputation for, and I would hope that with this release they would want to break that cycle and the notion of their shit quality control. In conclusion, if they do what I tell them to do, I guess it will be quite a good game. Maybe it would just be a good game for me though. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Thanks for watching everyone. Please leave a comment down below, as I've just told you to do, or asked you to do rather. If you have any other ideas about what should be in the next Elder Scrolls game, or if you agree with me or disagree with me on any point, leave a like and subscribe if you got to this part of the video. You're in the Cool Kids Club, of course. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you in a bit.